I want to touch on a specific lens this week that happens often in work that I'm involved in. This could be whether it's a school building, it could be a district, it could be an organization, kind of through this lens of leadership as it relates to belonging and trust and all these outcomes related to emotional intelligence and all the other outcomes that happen to it. But one of the things when I'm in these conversations, we are not looking at it through the lens of program or curriculum. We're more looking at it through this transformative lens of culture and organization. And so when we're talking about those things, we're really talking about systems leadership and systemic change, right? This work specifically isn't about one department or one direction. It's how do we infuse it and embed it in the foundation of just how the collective functions, operates, and is organized. And how does that streamline? How do we build coherence there? And so that's a lot of what I'm involved in when it comes to conversations with people is what do we have to do to get there? And two pieces really show up. The two pieces are capacity building and implementation. We have to build adult capacity because it's not just there or it's in certain pockets. And then we have to implement in a way that is going to be sustainable and successful as well as scalable over time and all the aspects that go into that. Redesign is a big part of that as well, just to make sure that if it's valued, if it's foundational, how are our systems, structures, protocols, expectations, evaluations, all those types of pieces reflective of what we say we value. And so there's a lot to that, but I'm going to touch on one specific aspect of it. And this actually was something that I was taught from one of my former bosses, just around leadership and really supporting people. And so I'm going to talk really quickly about capacity building and accountability, because a lot of times we try to hold people accountable for what we actually haven't built capacity around. For example, if we're talking about skills related to emotional intelligence or belonging or practices like that, and we come in and we start assessing leaders or people on their ability to regulate their emotions, their ability to navigate conflict, collaborate through those particular lenses, and we're holding them accountable, then we have to be able to say we built capacity, right? Just like a student, I'm gonna go to students because students kind of are the baseline for me in terms of my background. So if you're telling a student that they have to be able to do this concept on a math test, and you kind of go through the process and then you give them the math test and they don't do it and you give them an F and you're like, well, how did you not know how to do that? And you look and you never taught the kid how to actually do that particular aspect, right? You can't necessarily hold them accountable for it because your job was to develop them. Right? Just like a leader to a teacher. If you're teaching a teacher how to analyze and if you want teachers to really be individualized in their instruction and how to go about that process, well, if you're holding them accountable for not doing that, but you've never taught them a process through which they can analyze data, group people, and look at all these different angles, then you necessarily can't hold them accountable, right? It's more of an observation to go, wow, okay, I'm noticing they're really struggling to differentiate and meet students at their specific needs. I can't necessarily hold them accountable if I've never built their capacity. That's the same thing with this work. One of the things when we go to systemic change, when we go to kind of holding people to a standard of what is expected, what we need to do, the lenses we need to bring, how we need to function and operate, the leaders and the people have to be able to look back and go, okay, where are we developing their capacity in order to hold them accountable? But a lot of times we already start the accountability assuming they already know the things. And then when they don't, we don't give them good reviews. We put these things in place, but they ultimately had never actually been built around, right, that capacity. When I was a school administrator, it was the same thing. When we would do observations, when we'd be in classrooms, when we would just be noticing things, there would be a lot of like, ooh, these are areas to grow. And before we ever had conversations, or before we either ever held people accountable, we always sat back and go, okay, did we create the space to actually develop them about what we're talking about? If we did, cool, we could hold them accountable. Cool, we could have that conversation. We could bring that back up to say, hey, we need to be focused on blank, right? What we did. But if we hadn't, then we need to think about how are we going to develop them, because it is unfair for me to hold them accountable for something I've never built capacity around. And that's the same thing with this systemic work and the systemic shift in schools around emotional intelligence, belonging, etc. We have to be able to build the capacity in order to hold people accountable. We have to be able to develop accountability measures that are rooted in this in order to build capacity so that it becomes something that is prioritized. And so I want to touch on that, just the idea of building capacity with accountability. If you're having accountability without building capacity, that is not going to drive positive systems change. You have to be able to build capacity and then have accountability. And so building capacity is just such a big piece. And oftentimes it's actually something that really isn't developed. We just assume people have it or know what to do in these areas.